We welcome Tom Harper.
Well, I did. I wouldn't say I was going to make it. So good to be in Louisville. I drove down Eastern Parkway tonight to get to the restaurant. That's the way the map request sent me. Oh my God. I'm sure like a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, it was like prime. But even today, no?
No, it's been like that for a while.
Oh man, what a drive. Those gorgeous big oaks. I mean, you're like, yeah, it's beautiful drive. I had not driven that before in Louisville, so that was really a treat. So I'm thinking, this was meant to be. And the sun was just coming out at the end of the day, you know, so that was really pretty. Okay, somebody's going to be in charge of the lights, I assume. Hey, there's mine. Okay. I'll catch my breath here in a minute. I'll try to anyway. But we'll not only try to entertain you with some good stuff, we're going to educate you a little bit along the way. Because Ruth said, would you please include some cultural information in your presentation? I said, how long do you want the presentation to be? Because I don't know if you heard it or not, but Ruth said I've been growing orchids for over 40 years. And I'm only 42.
Amazing.
I mean, they're just a little guy, you know, starting out. Amazing. Yeah, 67, I love that number. I did do that, didn't I, in 67? Anyway, so we had several program choices, and this was the pick. And this pick is sort of unique because not only are we talking about smaller Phalaenopsis, these are like the micro minis. These are the really little guys. The issue that will be from a cultural standpoint, because so many of them are aligned to some of the species that are very small, they have very specific growth requirements. So they tend to be a little tricky. So there's your first cultural note right there on the presentation because of the species, and you'll see some of these species, and I'll try to mention to you that they're specific, they're a little more difficult to grow, etc., etc. But as a group, they tend to be more difficult to grow. These are your mounded Phalaenopsis. Whoa. Which should tell you they specifically have a growing season and a rest season. Once you get into the hybridizing aspect, it's sort of hybridizer vigor because, or hybrid vigor, because what's happening as they're bred is that they're easier to grow. But these guys, because they have some of these smaller species, they're going to be a little more difficult. Okay, enough of that aspect. Okay, if you think about the Phalaenopsis species, basically we've got about 73 identified, but there's been an increase in the number of those simply because as we've looked at them under the microscope, and we're talking electron microscope, and we've done the DNA testing and so on and so forth, some numbers have increased. And Phalaenopsis is one area. Some plants that you never think would be a Phalaenopsis are now classified. I will tell you that if you try to breed that into the Phalaenopsis scenario, good luck. You know, it's not going to happen because even though they've been moved into the Phalaenopsis, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're readily bred with other species and hybrids and groups. So, this is my favorite comment. In the area of Phalaenopsis, we don't think that there's been a lot going on over the years. We know that there's been certain trends, but you know, once you have a white Phalaenopsis, a pink Phalaenopsis, a yellow one, etc., I guess that's it. That's what you got. But the reality is, if you keep up with the Phalaenopsis world, you'll find out real quickly that there are some fabulous trends that are taking place, and believe it or not, it's continuing. It hasn't stopped. And I want to highlight some of those to you before we jump in deep. For instance, we've really focused on developing really good purple, grape-colored Phalaenopsis, and in some cases, as you see right there on that picture, a nice white edging around it, very unique and attractive. If you look at the Harlequin Phalaenopsis, we've got everything from pinky purples all the way to some really striking yellow hybrids too. And this is the group that we call the Harlequins. Now, from an educational standpoint, the Harlequins are due to one plant in particular, just one. And this is Phalaenopsis gilgupioca. We mentioned that at the dinner table tonight. Didn't want you folks at dinner to forget that aspect. That's where this comes from. One particular hybrid, one particular plant, a mutation that occurred during mirror cloning that resulted in a whole new direction that we call the Harleys. There are what we call the splash petal type Phalaenopsis. We get these interesting splash patterns. You can barely see it on that one, but very clearly on that other one. There are combinations of the two. You know, you can bring these two together, and now we're going to get a little bit of both, which makes classification at a show really crazy. Because you say, oh my gosh, it's got spots, but does it have a splash, or are those stripes? What is that? So it can be a real challenge working with those. There's now one of the newer trends of the broad-lipped Phalaenopsis. Some people call it pansy lips. And as you can tell here, these are broad lips, actually petal-like lips that will breed generation after generation. So we're going to see a lot of these in the coming years. This is one of the newer trends that are taking place. Other trends, would you believe, fragrant Phalaenopsis, we're going back to some of the species on those. And of course, if you breed species with species, over time, you will get better species. So species, but much improved, and there's a lot of that going on. We're still working on reds, of course. We still haven't seen that beautiful big fire engine red one. And of course, there are new species being found, and some are being reclassified, and this is going to open the door to breeding. But if you look at some of the newest trends and what's driving our program tonight, and the newest trend, very simply, is space. None of us ever have enough space to grow our orchids. Basements, windowsills, greenhouses are expensive, zoning laws, homeowners associations have real restrictions about what you can and cannot do in that respect. So what we're going to do tonight is talk about these micro-minis. Okay. So, this new approach in Phalaenopsis breeding, and of course I say that yes, there is something new in Phalaenopsis. The main objective is to develop smaller plants and still retain lots of flowers. So that's what this is about. We want to use current small species for breeding, and there's a bunch of those, and we'll look at those. We want to target some of the new species too, because they can bring in a whole new color pattern, unique spots, stripes, whatever, and that will add a different look as well. And then the excitement of creating these new looks, this is what also is driving hybridizers. And the secondary objective is to create easier to grow. This is the hard part. Because I got to tell you, some of these mounted, they are very seasonal, and you know, all the leaves go away sometime. And you got a mass of roots during its rest period. And then when it's ready to grow again, you'll start seeing new leaves start peeking out, and then you know to start watering it. So you've got to be really attuned to what the cultural requirements are of that particular species. So you can see the challenge. And of course, and breeders are a tough bunch, because they're going to try a hybrid whether it works or not, and they're going to try to get good seed out of it, but they're ready for a dead end. They're ready for empty seed pods and aborted seed pods. It just happens. But it's amazing, because of their persistence, that we've got some really unique plants. See, we want hybrids that are easier to grow. Here's a 3-inch pot, for instance. The roots are climbing out. This is one of those nice soft pots. Look at the roots inside the pot, and it's very happy at that size point. And that's exactly when we're driving our thoughts and plans to develop these kind of hybrids, that this is exactly what we want. This is the perfect micro-mini Phalaenopsis. See, it's full grown in a 3-inch pot. How sweet is that? Okay, now, this is really going to hit you hard, because this is all about the scientific side, because these are your species that we're going to talk about tonight. Whoa. Now, some of these you may recognize. Some you may have never heard of. And that's part of the challenge for breeders, because they want to bring in those unique species that have not been used before. Want to put them in together and breed them with each other. You may be familiar with Lobii, or maybe Javanica, Parisiae. Those are fairly common, but some of these definitely are not. And of course, there's some name changes here that will drive you crazy, because you bought the plant as this, but now it's reclassified as that. And in hybridizing, it may be accepted as the old name or the new name, and it's like, ooh, it's hard for me to keep up. Okay, so there are also a number of them that are not in this program, and some of these are highlighted in a new Phalaenopsis book. I don't know know if you're familiar with this or not. The IPA put together a project to work on the genus in pictures, and there's a beautiful book with 73 plus pictures. It's really a real pretty picture book. It has just tons of pictures. It's really nice. It's available from the IPA. It's like 20 bucks, and it's got 73 or so pictures. But anyway, if you're interested. But anyway, these are some of the ones we're not going to include in tonight's program. And like I say, you may not even recognize some of these guys. And some of them have not been used in breeding, so we don't really know what they can do, but there's a real potential of working with these to see what might happen. Okay, so we'll talk about in the program tonight the habitat of where these plants grow, the nature of their flowers, the inflorescence, and their distribution, just to give you an idea. Okay, we'll look at them alphabetic. Now, you may have never seen this little guy before. This is Appendiculata. This picture does it really good, because you know how big that flower is? About that big. Can you see the light through there? Yeah, about that size? It is really a little guy. But when you go close to the flower and look at it and see how unique it is a beauty. You know, it's like some of these plural phthalates that you see that are just little bitty, and you look at them and you say, well, that's not much of anything, but you get a microscope or a magnifying glass and you realize and appreciate what size these are. See, we're talking 1 to 1.5 centimeter flowers. Whoa, that's a little guy. Yeah, pretty small. And it has a nice little cluster, as you can see, them bloom like that. And they hang down when they bloom. The plant, I have some of these, and they're mounted. And the leaves just stick out just like that from the mound. Water them about once a week, or sometimes 2 or 3 times a week during the growing season. And then when the inflorescence comes out, it goes bloop and down. It has a cluster of really pretty flowers. Really show it. Great potential in breeding simply because look at the size of the lip in comparison to the size of the flower. Look at the color patterns here. This would add a whole new wrinkle to working with some Phalaenopsis that we don't normally see in that kind of breeding. Here's Braciana. Again, 1 to 2 centimeter type flowers. Pretty good inflorescence with 4 to 8 flowers. Again, you see best mounted. This is just basically hanging in the air with just a little bit of maybe moss on there. And look at the nice inflorescence that it produces. And the nice presentation that it has. Kind of a brownish, goldish flower. So it's not going to be a real good player for color. But the presentation is really good. And the inflorescence has a lot of flowers. So there's still potential for using this. Interesting flower, isn't it? Now, Chubet is fairly new on the scene, but it's one of the ones that's been used a fair number of times, and we're going to see some of the offsprings of this. It's got a great habit. You see nice upright inflorescences. They tend to bloom around that inflorescence in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Ooh, maybe a dozen flowers on one. And they'll typically produce 2 inflorescences. So you get 20, 25 flowers. Very nice. But again, quite small. You see? The weak guys. And the plants are quite small. And they really are happy on a log with the roots running up and down. They come from areas of the world where they get a real seasonal rain and dry spell. You know, in the tropics, in this case Vietnam, in the tropics, that's what they have. They have wet seasons, which are typically the growth season, and then they have distinctively dry seasons. And it all depends on the winds and which way they blow and the amount of moisture. But they've adapted to that and they do quite well. Here's another one. This has been around a very long time. Some breeding as King Idiom. Now, Phalaenopsis deliciosa, once again a change. But these are really attractive from the standpoint that the flowers are very flat. And you can see it has more of a typical form of a Phalaenopsis. In other words, broad petals, nice broad sepals, good lip, good presentation of the flower. There's a fair number of hybrids out there. Our screen doesn't fit, does it? We need a bigger screen. If I go back, it'll get too big. I got to go this way.
No, back. The other way.
The boat is through there.
Away from us.
Yes.
There you go. That's better.
But I got a big spot on
The words, yes.
Go further.
Go further. glad to lose my flower. Okay.
Oh,
Other right, we were wrong. Other way.
I knew it is. I've never done it. I just go with what the flow says.
There you go.
That better? Okay. Isn't that cool? Now, for flatness, it's not going to win a prize, is it? And what do those judges say? Well, I want the flower to be nice and flat. Well, the nature of the species is it's never going to be flat. It's really got this windswept look. But you know, it's really cool looking, isn't it? And you can see, obviously this was a collected plant, well chewed and kind of rough shape. Isn't that interesting on the coloration of that flower? And the interesting side lobes and lips. It's just unique. And there's been some breeding with this. We're going to see some of that in a few minutes. That's Finley. Yeah. What's called minus, Phalaenopsis minus. Now it's Finley correctly. That's the best term. Globosa is one you may recognize being a lot like Lobii or Parisia. What they've done, they've split it up. Now there are Globosa. So it used to be Lobii, but now it's more Globosa, and it's all based on the lip structure. When you separate Phalaenopsis species apart, it's based on the lip structure. It's not based on color. It's not based on form. It's all about the lip structure. That's how they do that. Oops, sorry. So you can see that it's very happy with those roots just crawling around on it. Now, that's when it was actively growing, but you can tell it's flowering right now, and it's not so actively growing, is it? We don't see a new leaf coming out, we just see the leaves there. And the plant's pretty much at rest, but boom, here come the flowers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 flowers on the inflorescence. Not a lot, but unique form of the flowers, isn't it? Really, really unique form. Here's Phalaenopsis. I put this in there too. The Kew Gardens accepts it as Wilsonite. Once again, a little confusion, and it looks a lot like the one we saw earlier too. The Phalaenopsis. Really interesting shape, wonderful color forms, and hopefully this could add to the breeding you see in the color arrangements that we like to have. And a good flower count. Small flowers. This is a little bit bigger, 2.5 to 3 centimeters. Javonica is not a new species by any means. It's been out there a number of years. And you can see what they do is they bloom in these clusters. And again, they're underneath the leaves. And if you grow it in a pot, the poor inflorescences can get trapped in the pot and you'll never see the flowers. So they're better mounted so that those inflorescences can hang down. And you can see these gorgeous flowers. This is a clearly striped flower. Broken pattern, but nice wide sepals and petals. Very desirable for hybridizing. The best scenario on hybridizing is to use this with other small ones. Years ago when it was first discovered, they used it with some of the big modern complex hybrids. And the results were kind of a mixed bag. Not so great. And unfortunately, pretty much sterile. You couldn't go to the next generations. When you take a diploid species, jungle collector, breeding with a complex hybrid, which is probably a tetraploid, you get triploids. And triploids don't breed. If they do reluctantly and very little seed. So as a result, the best avenue is to work with other species. Now, we had this already? Like the Globosa? Well, no, this is Lobii, see? And it's a little confusing to most of us because it looks very much like the other flower. So the splitters have actually pulled this one, the Lobii apart, and made Globosa as one, and then Lobii as a separate one. But these are very interesting little flowers. By the way, the lips are hinged. When the wind blows, they do this at you, which is kind of cool. Wave at you. And most recently, there's been a new color form discovered, and has been propagated. They've been selfing these and sitting these, and now we're getting some obviously pinkish colored forms with really striking lips. This is going to add a new color, you see, to the species breeding of the Lobias, because normally they've been white. I took these pictures. I borrowed these from Norman's Orchids website. He had these for sale one time. Just kind of hold on to your pocketbook. Here they come. Because they're rare and unusual. And of course, if you got one, it would be a seedling, which means that it could be this or it could be a normal. It could be just about anything. But these are obviously very select. I thought they were really attractive. What these represent, this number here, this NF2152, these are all NF2152. These are a seed population bloom. So if you order the 2152, you're guaranteed not to get one of those. Because these are the best of what's there, they're going to keep these. And they're going to breed those, but that's a good thing. But if you got one with any amount of color like that, it'd be desirable. They're really pretty. Okay, maculata. Oh boy. I've owned maculata off and on for years and years and years, and I have killed them all. Except one. Except one. The one successful player. Because I used to put them in a pot. And I thought, well, that's the way to go. Wrong answer. It's mounted. And it's very distinctly grow in rest season. And sure enough, I've grown and flowered it, and mine looks very much like that. And that's pretty much standard for it. It's a very white flower with very distinctly red spots like that. Nice flower. Not a lot of them, but yeah. And there are some unusual yellow forms of it. So they don't have all the darker color here. They have actually this yellow. This is a recognized flava variety. Now, have we had this already? No. Is that not lobii? Is that not gibosa? No, it's now twins. Well, the splitters are at it again. Because even though it looks a lot like the others, there's obviously enough significant lip structure difference that it's got its own recognition. We'll see. You know, it'd be interesting to see if you bred them all and to see which would come out, if they'd all breed the same way or not. I do know this. Here's another hybridizing note. Let's see. The Phalaenopsis lobii from Vietnam is the best lobii breeder. Lobii from India, if it's India, or some other country, not so much. But one of the breeders in Taiwan tipped me off to that. He says, if you ever do breeding with lobii, make sure it comes from Vietnam, because that's the best one. Really? I guess who knew? But obviously he did that work, so he knew. Okay. Oh, darn, haven't we seen this already? This is Parisia. See, it used to be Parisia radi lobii, then it was lobii, now it's Parisia too. So we split this all up. A little bit different location, as you notice, if you've been following me on these maps. Because some are located here, some over here in Asia, some down here. So, yeah, different colored lip, different structure in the lips as well. So, yeah, pretty interesting. Now, if you're going for the number of flowers, this one is particularly good. This is Stobartiana. This is a very greenish yellow flower. This one, I love this one. It's very green. Got a nice habit, a lot like Phalaenopsis we've seen. Really good flower structure. Very desirable. A little difficult on culture simply because of that wet, dry season scenario. When they flower, look at that. That explodes. It's probably a collective plant. That's right. Pretty nice. Ooh, haven't we seen this already? Oh, no, this is Thailandica. There you go. And, wow, what a specimen. Obviously collected again. Look at the number of flowers on this. Very much like lobii, and obviously in the lobii group. Just a little different lip color and structure. Okay? Now, just to compare them, okay, because we've talked about all of these. You know, there's Thailandica, gibosa, Parisia, lobii, and malquinensis. They have a lot alike, but a little bit different. So the splitters have won the battle. We've got them all divided up. Okay, here's Wilsoni, also known as Phalaenopsis. Very similar to Stobartiana. No question about that. But again, little variations in it. Now, because you try to understand all this stuff and put it all together, I did this chart. And I did this chart to simplify things. But the first time I gave this program, I just bombed the audience. It was way too much. So I tried to simplify it since then. I don't know if I was successful. Okay, so what I did was this. Okay, this is talking about first generation hybrids with the very species we just looked at. Because there's appendiculata. See, there's 5 first-generation hybrids. That's all. Whoa! Do you know how many first-generation hybrids there are of Phalaenopsis amabilis or Aphrodite? We're talking 21,000. We got 5. Right there. So this is just beginning, isn't it? I mean, just beginning on the first part of it. So out of the F1, there's 5 progeny, meaning that there's more generation after the first one, but only 5. That's not very many. Braciana, and I put the awards on there just to show their recognition. But see again, see 12 F1 hybrids here and 14 progeny there. So Chibay has done pretty good. But obviously this guy here, he's been around a long time. There's lots of work with Deliciosa. There's some work going on with Finley. And Gabosa, which we saw, very little. And Javanica, like I mentioned, very desirable. Look at this, the 137 project. So in other words, this just says to you, when you especially look at this last column, what's the most active species in the group? Well, clearly, Javanica on this page, and clearly, Deliciosa right here. The other guys just really getting started good. Maybe there's problems breeding. Maybe they don't produce good seed. Maybe they don't set seed. Big part.
Who's keeping track of all that? Is that just a time?
I did. Did you see?
Yeah.
I
mean, is that valid for every breeder, or is that just for your?
This is just a culmination of information.
Information that is available to you.
Right. I gleaned it out from the data that's there.
Oh, okay.
See, I have 2 programs that I use. I have there's the AOS program, and then there's the I'm dead. Orchid Whiz.
Okay.
Yeah, Orchid Whiz. Of the 2, Orchid Whiz is very easy to use, and you can get all kinds of data from it. And so what I did, I used mainly Orchid data or Orchid Whiz to get the data and pull it out, and then put it up here like this.
Yeah, and that is valid for now and forever.
I promise.
It can also be changed if there's other data coming in.
Oh, there's no question. This data was current at a point in time.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Correct.
trying to figure out.
It's current today, or you know, when I put the program together recently. Okay, but next year these numbers are going to change.
Yeah.
Because as hybridizers continue to move the points forward, they're going to increase the numbers.
But they have something to start.
Correct.
Yeah. Basis there. Yeah.
And of course, hybridizers will examine this information too.
Yeah.
Say, well, this is a pretty hot little species to use because look at all the hybrids.
Yeah.
Let me look and see who are those offspring. And you can look up those 137 offspring and see, well, that was bred with this, that was bred with that, and that. And so you can get a real picture. So if you're doing hybridizing, you see you can do this on paper, and then you can go to the greenhouse and make your hybrids. So you don't repeat something that's already been done, or you can add to what's already been started. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, that is cool.
See, I used to do a lot of breeding, and I understand, you know, what their thinking is and how they're approaching it, and that's why they use this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
See, here's another one. No, there's not. Oh, yeah. What I did is I put up some of the names of some of the more famous ones. Chibay and Puchirma makes music surprise. It's got 6 awards and 2 offspring. Deliciosa and Puchirma makes tiny. It's got 12 awards and 5 offspring. Finley and Timothy Christopher, the Used Stardust, made in 2008 with 3 awards. Some of this is kind of cool. And Javanica with Quarter Cervi has 3 awards and 2 offspring. Now, my claim to fame, I don't have any. My claim to fame is I remade that hybrid. Javanica and Quarter Cervi. But somebody registered ahead of it. Missed that. It could have been Phalaenopsis Tom Harper. I'm not apt to do that. I'm not an egomaniac. So, but I raised up the population. Well, guess what? Those 3 awards, that was from my breeding. Because the person it was named after, he's in Thailand. They didn't get distributed at all. He just registered it because he made the hybrid. I remade the hybrid. Mine got distributed, and the people who took them and grew them and showed them, boom, they got awards. Bingo. I got 1 on myself, and some of my friends got awards too. Hey, it worked. Woo! How about that? It's pretty cool. But look at the date. See, it was registered in 93. Mine came available around the 90s, about the same time frame, and those awards are back in the 90s. Yes, sir.
Is Phalaenopsis still Phalaenopsis?
Pardon me?
Phalaenopsis, is that Phalaenopsis now?
Yep. Oh, stop that. All the old Phalaenopsis
Okay.
are now Phalaenopsis because all the Doritis are now Phalaenopsis.
Okay.
That was a decision made at the RHS, the Royal Horticultural Society. They did that a few years ago. Well, it simplified life a lot. Yeah. Because it just dumped all those Phalaenopsis, which were never Phalaenopsis anyway, in the trash, and they're all now Phalaenopsis. And rightly so. Question?
So the awards you got, Tom, are those AOS awards?
Correct.
They're
now,
not?
this is what this indicates. These are, when they say awards, this is an AOS award.
Okay.
Yeah.
And one other thing I might have missed or went over my head.
I'm sorry.
These obviously are not what we think of as Phalaenopsis. So what makes these micro minis Phalaenopsis versus what's on the table over there? Is it form? Is that what you said?
Size.
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 But still, they don't look like the moth Phalaenopsis.
Correct. But you've seen the species
Yes.
that are contributing to the micro minis. And when you look at these next pictures I'm going to show you of the hybrids made with these, you're going to understand why they look the way they do and why they don't look like the standard Phalaenopsis.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's not just this different line of breeding, it's a different look altogether. And some people find the species that I'm showing you have a unique look and a real unique beauty about them too, because they're not the standard Phalaenopsis.
Right.
See? Kind of neat like that. Okay, here's Lobii. See, it's up at 96, pretty high, and Parisi here at 63. And remember, these two used to be lumped together, so that's over 150 when you put those two together. So this Lobii Parisi group, oh man, it's just blowing everybody off the page because there are more hybrids made with them than all these others. See, they're coming in number one when you look at those together. Now, since they've been separated, they become distinctly this and this, so it's a little fuzzy. And it probably always will be. Okay, here's some of the ones that with Lobii. Ginos Cherry makes Liu's Cute Angel, 7 awards, look at that. Here's Eduardo Pushing Bean in Liu's Stripe Prince in 06 with 6 awards. Look at this, this guy's got lots of awards. And then there's Mini Mark, which was made by Mark Rose, Micronova and Phalaenopsis with 16 awards. So this guy really generated a lot of interest. And that was a U.S. hybrid. See, some of these other hybrids we've been naming, this is in Taiwan, this was in Taiwan, but Mini Mark was U.S. U.S. hybrid. Mark Rose did that. And Mark, in North Carolina, he had those and subsequently got them distributed, and 16 of them got AOS awards. Whoa, that's a lot. Anytime you see that kind of, that's a lot. Really attractive and really showy. Maculata Lobii makes Micronova. See, here's Micronova right here. So Mark took Micronova and bred it with Phalaenopsis, and Micronova has 3 awards. Then Parisi and Crucerima, this Analorati Sicardi, 9 awards. See, some of these have done really good things to breeding and got recognized by AOS awards. So what we want to do now is we want to say, okay, let's move on from that. Let's make out some neat hybrids. And I want to show you some pictures. I've got some more stuff to show you here. You're still burning in any questions, short and sweet. Okay. Pictures. What we really want to see. Charts are fine, but pictures are fun. I won't bore you with charts. I know, but you got to understand. Okay, so here we have the Parisi guy. Parisi, remember, looks like Lobii. Looks like Phalaenopsis. Okay. So this is some good examples of Analorati Sicardi. Look at the color on these. You know, white with this beautiful coloration, dark lip. But look, sometimes if you use the right Crucerima, like a blue one, you'll get this blue hue about it. So you can automatically understand the absolute charm on these pictures right here, and that's just why I throw it out to you right here. I mean, the colors are great, the forms are attractive, they are unique. And look at the branching aspect of this. Just lots and lots of flowers. Gee, that's why we grow these, right?
Right.
Question?
What size are those blooms?
Little guys.
Little guys.
We're not talking a 4-inch or 6-inch flower here,
Oh,
okay?
I know that.
We're talking about less than an inch. And that centimeter is pretty accurate. But they make up for that in quantity, especially in this case here. And, you know, Prochyrium is a producer of flowers. When it puts up that inflorescence, when they're well grown, they'll branch and produce a ton of flowers. So you put the Prochyrium mix in it, you change the form of it, and they really get attractive. With nice color. And they're really cute. I think cuteness is worth something, okay? Speaking of cute, here's Liu's cute angel. I visited Mr. Liu when I was in Taiwan last trip. Unlike most of the growers, he is on the eastern side of Taiwan. That's good and that's bad. Guess where all the typhoons hit when they hit Taiwan? On the eastern side. Exactly. So you just as have to get blown away or washed away when you're on the eastern side. And there's a mountain range right down the middle of Taiwan, and guess what? It blocks the bulk of those storms. So the western side is okay. Although the rains, when it rains, it rains. So anyway, he's done tremendous work in this whole arena. So here's the Lobii hybrid again with Jaiho's cherry. Some of you got that little Jaiho's pixie. Well, there's Jaiho's right there. This is a nursery name in Taiwan. And obviously Jaiho's cherry, that's theirs. And the Jaiho pixie is theirs too. But anyway, again, look at their production of flowers. We've got good color, we've got great lips on this, nice sized plant, not too big. And just a really attractive, I mean, those are just hard to see. If I was late, it's like this. We're not talking like this. We're talking like this. So this is a great windowsill. And remember, the more breeding that these hybridizers do that moves us away from the difficulty growing of the species like Lobii, the easier it gets to be growing for us. So that's good. So you don't have to put them in a mount. You actually can put them in a pot. And they'll do okay. How about Liu's cute angel and Lobii? So this is a back cross. Oh, and here's some seed population blooming. Look at that. A pink one, a white one, orange lips, real dark color, or you got pure white color. I just, still very much the Lobii look. Like we said, it's not going to be a big, round, happy 4-inch, 5-inch Phalaenopsis. It's going to be a unique formed one with this beautiful shape. And if we can get them out of the foliage and get them upright, you know, get them blooming, that would be fabulous. Here's some other examples. Now, it's really hard to find these. I did some real digging to get these pictures for you. But anyway, here's Kung's Low Lawrence, which is Lobii, that's what we're focusing on, with Brother Lawrence. Anybody remember Brother Lawrence?
Yes.
You, you and I would remember that.
I killed it.
I've done my share too. You know, you're not an official orchid grower unless you've killed how many? 1,000? Yeah, right. Okay, once again, you see you got very much the habit of the Lobii, but a good flower count. Brother Lawrence is a yellow, a very famous yellow. If you follow Phalaenopsis breeding, you go back in the background of almost all the yellows. There's Brother Lawrence. It's in the background of a lot of things. It's very valuable. Anyway, got this yellow color, tends to fade, but not there. Here, look, here's something real. This is so new. I love this. Look at this little guy. It's blooming in a pot, for heaven's sakes. Look at this finger. Gosh, it's bigger than the plant. So, again, Lobii and appendiculata. See, back to Mr. Liu again in Taiwan. He's making these hybrids, making it work. So the stripe pattern coming out of appendiculata here, but the broad lip coming from Lobii. This is what hybridizing is all about, folks. This is why these hybridizers just can't stand. They get so excited. And I love this. They get so excited over this. Yeah. I mean, he's pointing at it. He's happy. He's proud of it. Amazing. Thank goodness there are people in the world like that, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, if they weren't, we would never see it. Oh, how about this one? Liu's gold corn. Now, this is a complex hybrid. which is corner cervi and Suan cricket. Suan cricket goes back a ways, but he's got many on the background. At any rate, several species here. Then with lobii, whoa, we sure got the color come through, didn't we? And again, see, now we've got a nice habit of upright inflorescences. They're probably supported by wires to help them, but nevertheless, we've really got a nice flower count too. And then here's one, chainmaw evergreen, and lobii. So we've got different combinations of yellows and whites, and then real broad lip, generally brighter in color comes through. Here's Liu's triprius. Now I saw these in Taiwan. Mr. Liu had these in flower at the time. I had to hold myself up. He had a bench of these. Oh my gosh. They were this tall. And they were branched. And they would absolutely knock your socks off. They were incredible. Because you can see, here they go. Here we got branches, and they're upright. No support. They're just upright on their own. And they are fabulous. And I thought to myself, back the truck up. We'll take them all. Didn't happen, but nevertheless. These have been for sale in the marketplace, but limited. Norman had a window to get those, and he had them on his website at one time. I don't think they exist now. In fact, I've not seen them in a number of years. And I don't know if there's been any further breeding with these. But, yeah, really, really nice flowers. Some of them had actually shades of pink. I saw several of them. Some of them had yellow lips, some of them had orange lips, some of them had shades of pink on the flowers. Really pretty. Here's Timothy Christopher and lobii. Timothy Christopher, a little novelty white. If you've got little snow, it's a lot like that, but a little bit bigger. Here's Liu's rainbow bridge, which is lobii. This is a striper. This is where that broad lip comes from with the stripes in the little stripe pattern. That's from Lindinia. Really cool. I mean, who would breed this stuff? Because it's so unique and so specialized that it's going to take somebody really devoted to this kind of breeding to make it happen. I told you I'd show you a Finley iron hybrid. Look at that. Now he's not swept back anymore because he's flattened out, thank goodness, because of the Caribbean sunset parent. So this is reasonably flat. They still reflect some, as you can see. Look at the nice color now. And you know what's going to happen. They'll breed it on to the next generation. The next generation will be flatter and better. We'll bring in all those unique color aspects coming from the Finley. Really cool. Ooh, here's appendiculata with deliciosa. Oh my gosh. Most of the stripes are gone. I'm disappointed in that one. But, hey, it bred, it made good seed. Here's Chibe and Finley. Oh my gosh. Who would make that? So, interesting color pattern here. Just the beginning, folks. We're going to see some really good stuff coming out of this. And stay tuned for more to come. Okay, so we had some cultural questions. And you may have some. We want to make sure, because Ruth said, Tom, would you be sure to include some culture? Okay, so we talked about this group tonight. These are all mounted. Your best success of the lobii group, Finley eyes, everything we saw is best mounted because they very distinctly have a growing season and a rest season. But when it comes to basic Phalaenopsis, got any cultural questions there?
I have a question for back to your distinctive growing season and rest season. How long is that rest season supposed to be?
In nature, it's determined by the climate and the very aspect of the return of the rains. Sometimes a plant will start up to grow in anticipation of the rain. I find that fascinating. How does it know? So the other aspect is the rains come and then it starts. But that's the determining factor and how long that rest period is. Now, you won't know that. However, because the plant internally, I know it doesn't have a brain, but internally it seems to know, maybe because of the longer days, shorter nights, or whatever combination, they seem to sense that it is time to grow. Maybe it's the warmer temperature. And they respond in such a way. So what you do, and here's what's so critical for you to culture these properly. I learned this a long time ago. Pay attention to your plant. Be a good observer. Because as soon as the plant starts to grow, and you'll see the new leaf emerge, or you'll see the new root emerge, either way, that's telling you this is the time that we need to start to return to watering, return to fertilizing. Because during the rest period, they need very little water and no fertilizer whatsoever. Now, that's not just speaking of complex hybrids. They're complex hybrids. They're so far from species now that they follow a different routine altogether.
My problem is I have Caboose, I have Thailandia, Mauritian, Lobian. There's one more up there. But in terms of the distinctive rest, the only one I've ever seen take a distinctive rest is Caboose, and it will sometimes drop it.
Yes, which will sometimes do. And you know, I mentioned that lip structure is the way that they classify them. The reality is sometimes growth habit will come into play too. In other words, yeah, this particular species loses its leaves, this one doesn't.
Right.
And that's another additional factor in separating into this species and that species. So sometimes the morphology of it is that the way they do it.
But see, what I'm saying is I've never seen them even pull their root tips in. They stay green root tips growing most of the winter. They'll slow up a little bit January maybe.
And they may be responding to your culture too, because in nature, if the rain shuts down, then they're done. And the only way that they're going to survive is through fogs or mist like that. It's going to pump those roots up. They're okay.
So do I force them to stop, or do I just let them continue to do what they've been doing?
You let them do what they're doing.
Okay.
Because see, they're probably adapting to you in the way you're treating them.
Yeah.
Plants will do that to a point. Those that are seedlings of species will do better at that than a collected plant would do. Because a collected plant, remember, their narrow focus is to respond to their environment, period. When you move them to your environment, you're not going to treat them the way they were there. But they may not respond properly either. They may just up and die and say, I can't handle this. I'm getting too much water. Something like that. Okay, yes, sir?
We've had many speakers here to talk about propagating orchids, and they focused on light, how much light and light cycling, watering, nutrients, temperature. I've never heard anyone talk about the effect of altitude. Some of the species you have shown us here was from Nepal. Mile high, oxygen content there is probably equivalent to 19% rather than 21% here. Is that a factor in the ability to propagate these at now sea level?
It's not as it relates to propagation. It is as it relates to culture. In other words, if you want to do some breeding with some of these species, where you place them in your greenhouse, if you have a greenhouse, makes a difference as how they will thrive. So in other words, if they're from a higher elevation and cooler temperatures, you need to put them in a greenhouse in such a place.
Higher elevation? I mean, my wife is looking at building a greenhouse, so I have to make it a mile high?
Got to build a taller greenhouse. Got to put an apartment upstairs. Actually, no, because as you move up in a greenhouse, it gets warmer. Your coolest spot in a greenhouse is down low. The temperature would stay uniform, cooler there than it does here. So, in other words, whoever's doing it would have to make sure, knowing their own greenhouse, where they need to put it in order for it to survive properly. But when they do the breeding, you know, they're just going to exchange the pollen from one to the other.
But my question is more, how much of a factor is atmospheric pressure? The pressure of the oxygen and carbon dioxide in a plant that evolved a mile high from sea level versus one that evolved at sea level.
No different. That's right. Big difference there between there and there. And I understand that aspect. I don't know if there's any studies I've ever heard or ever read that would relate to that whatsoever. I think when you think in terms of, well, the rainfall is still the same. The light's a little brighter at higher elevation. Temperatures are a little cooler up there. I don't know that there's any other factors that would come into play, but certainly there's less air up there because it's higher up. But obviously they've adapted. to that aspect. But I don't know there's any studies that I'm aware of that have been done.
But some species are more successful than others in being able to get progeny and propagate. I wonder whether this is one factor that
It
hasn't
could
been
be,
considered.
but more than likely, it's more based on an incompatibility between these two parents.
Yeah.
Because, as I mentioned early on in my program, I said some plants, some species have been reclassified into Phalaenopsis. But if you try to breed those with Phalaenopsis, it's not going to happen. So the DNA may say one thing, but a hybridizer will say, forget about it. That's not happening. I've tried that before. There's no way that you're going to breed those two together. They don't make seed. And you can try it 100 times and you'll have 100 failures. It just happens. You know, hybridizers are more key to bringing traits from this species and this species together for the next generation.
Right.
And they're looking at flower form or flower color or the number of flowers. I mean, why do you think Phalaenopsis pucherrima was used in hybridizing? It produces a ton of flowers. So that and Chiba, which also produces a good number of flowers, that's a good combination there. And the fact that it was successful, it got lots of flowers. It's a good question, but I think it may be beyond, it's certainly beyond my knowledge. And I don't know that there's anyone that's really related directly to that. Certainly from a hybridizing standpoint. These guys are like, I got a toothpick. We're going to town here. You know, that's the way they do.
Yeah.
I've been there before. I've done that, although I've tried to be a little more careful than that. Well, you got to pay for this stuff. It's not free. Yes, sir.
So I have an experience. In my country, the orchid was on top of the mountain. Well, the temperature was not so much different.
What's your country?
It was Haiti.
Haiti.
It was altitude.
Right.
When we bring them down, maybe 1,000 feet to the city, they were not hybrid, they were orchid.
They were species,
orchids,
right.
Yeah. The flowers, the color of the flower will be different.
Correct.
The heart,
Correct.
the same
Correct.
intensity, the same vivacity, if I can use this term, with the flower, with the plant we bring down to another environment, even if we put them in trees and try to give them the canopy and etc. There is a difference.
And they bloom. Right, and that's a temperature factor. And I know this from growing Phalaenopsis that the cooler I keep the greenhouse within reason, the better color my flowers are. The warmer temperatures, in other words, for flower blooms in the summertime versus blooming in the early spring or winter, the color is much better in winter, spring than it is in summer. The heat affects the temperature. That's especially true in cattleyas. In your case, whether it was on Sydney or whether it was the Bretonias or whatever the species it was, yeah, that's a direct result of moving it from where it has better color and a higher elevation, cooler, than to a warmer one. Yeah, that's perfect. That's what's going to happen. And it's hard. I mean, you just can't prevent it. I mean, that's how
You were disappointed.
I know what you were. Sorry, but that's what it is.
I might be following up on John's question here a bit, and if I do, just cut me off. I always thought hybridizing, what does it do to the plant? Forget the flowers. But, you know, does it change a Corvette into a Mack truck somehow? You know, I mean, you're really fooling with nature, and does the plant suffer? Does the plant grow better? What happens to the...
Let me ask the ladies in the audience here. How many of y'all have been pregnant? Does it put some strain on you?
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean that's the answer to the question. Anytime, I'm just making fun, ladies, don't take offense. Anytime that an orchid or a plant holds a seed pod, it puts a certain level of stress on it. Because not only does it have to survive, it's trying to push enough energy and food into the next generation of making the seed. Now that's imperative to the next generation. But what will happen sometimes, if the plant is stressed, the plant itself is stressed in some way, it will abort the seed pod. In other words, let's say you have a seed pod that's doing just fine, the plant's doing just fine, but one day the fan in your greenhouse doesn't work and it goes to 100 degrees. The plant will abort that seed pod in a minute for its very survival. And that's not uncommon to see that. I've had that happen before when I had a failure of a system in the greenhouse. That the temperature went up or temperature went down. I had a heater failure one time, and the temperature went to 36. Lost every flower in the greenhouse, but the plants were fine. But any seed pods you see would be aborted right there just for the survival of the plant. So plants seem to know that. And it's a physiological scenario, so they protect themselves that way. Because they can't, if they should die, they can't breed to the next generation, you see. But if you abort the seed pod, there's another day to make another seed pod. And I think that's how they think. Is that right?
Yeah, you know that grafting roses or hibiscus, when you different graft, when something happened, like you said, dry weather or too much rain, the plant will produce the old, original flowers instead of the grafted one.
Good point, sure. Yeah, okay, because the stress on it.
Yes.
And they do respond to that. Exactly. You had a question?
Yeah, I may be following up on Sal's line of thought.
I'm sorry?
But I may be following up on his point, but...
You guys want to go to the side?
Yeah, right.
Talk this over and then come back?
So, aside from the stress on the plant that is now breeding the offspring, in the selection of a plant to produce a better flower or color, there's possibly other effects on the root structure, stem structure, leaf structure that may be unwanted in that breeding. And I think that's where he was heading.
Oh, no kidding.
Right, yeah.
I mean, I can attest to that 100 times. Okay, so years ago, I'm on this trail because I'm going to be a big time breeder, okay? So I'm moving that pollen around with my toothpick and I'm doing this and I'm doing that and I'm keeping those good records and all that good stuff. And I've got somebody to do my flasking and I don't have to do that, thank goodness. And so I'm getting my plants back in the flask. And I'm planting them out and I'm growing and I'm just thinking, oh, I just can't wait to see them bloom.
So how long does it take?
I remember I had, you know what these 10-20 trays are like? This is a nursery tray, 10-20 tray, 10 inches wide, 20 inches. That was my compost because they were getting up pretty big and I put them in that tray. And it's got 50, 60 plants in it. Well, it just so happens that I just left them in there and they started to bloom. And I kept hoping as they bloomed, the first one, the second one, the 10th one, the 20th one. It didn't happen. My plan was great, but the reality was bad. Adios. And that's what hybridizers have to do, because even though the best laid plans on paper and looking at the species in the background, it's still not enough. Because when you start moving pollen, you may as well just shake the dice and roll them, because that's exactly what's going to happen.
How about one more question?
How about it? I'm game.
Do you do green pod or dry pod?
Green. But I haven't sent off. I don't do my own flasking. I know how to do it, but it's a time element. By the way, and Ruth didn't tell you this, my little business is 2,000 square feet. I do it all by myself. My wife takes care of the finance. I do everything. If it's mechanical, I do it. If it's electrical, everything. Repot, I do it. So that's enough. So and adding something like flasking to it, that's a little more than I can handle. But there's some very good flasking services available. They're not cheap, not like they used to be, but there's some good ones out there. And if you wanted to attempt it, by all means, give it a shot. For your plants that you purchased from me, I thank you. Appreciate you doing that. I think you'll be happy with them. If you're not, be sure to let me know. Those plants are watered once a week. When it comes to fertilizing and culture, talk to this lady right here. Don't point the finger at you. I'm just kidding. No, she's very knowledgeable and can be very helpful. When Rick Lockwood from Nashville was here, Rick had a lot of good information for you. He's got a very strong foundation in chemistry and nutrition and knows plants. He's done a ton of research. And the reason I can say that, Rick used to go with me to Atlanta from time to time. And from the time we left and the time we got back, he would wear me out with nutritional information. I mean, I never questioned it. I know he was right because every now and then I'd think something through with it he'd say, and yeah, that's right, that makes sense. But then he's off doing something else again. Anyway, really good information, and I've started adapting his formula that K-Lite, the K-Lite fertilizer. Yeah, orchids in Phalaenopsis in particular are not heavy feeders. Please understand that. You don't have to just use tons of fertilizer to make it work. The plants that you purchase from me, they're in sphagnum moss. They got lots of good roots running around in there. Don't repot them. You don't have to. Just leave them alone, let them bloom out, and then repot them when they're finished blooming. You'll move them into a 4-inch pot. If they got lots of roots, you go to 4.5. Do not use a 5. Keep them small, and they'll be happy. I did that myself, and now the batch I did last year getting ready to bloom, and they're perfectly happy in a 4 or 4.5 inch pot. So you don't have to do anything else other than that. If you move it from moss to some other material, you will set the plant back. Quite honestly, the chemistry of moss is different from the chemistry of bark or chemistry of anything else. And once you move plants from one material to another, unless you can catch the window just perfectly as they grow, you'll tend to lose those older roots. If you stay with moss, you won't skip a beat.
And we put them on a board?
After they flower.
After they flower.
When they get ready to grow, yes, you can mount them if you want to do that. The way to mount is you take your mount, you put the moss on the mount, and you put the plant on the moss. Fishing line is great. They even use some old pantyhose. It work too. So yeah, anything that's a real elastic that'll last real good like that's perfect.